A jagged bolt of lightning tore across the night sky, illuminating the battered sign that read, Santa Fe Correctional Facility, 2 miles. Marissa Hale's hands tightened on the steering wheel of her mud-splattered Ford pickup, knuckles white in the ghostly flash. Rain hammered the windshield in relentless sheets, each drop a sharp tap against her raw nerves. Somewhere behind her, in the horse trailer swaying gently with every gust, Icarus shifted his weight and let out a low, uneasy nicker, the sound muffled but urgent. For the last hour, Marissa hadn't been able to take her eyes off the looming silhouette of the prison perched on the mesa, its razor-wire crown glowing under the storm's sporadic brilliance. Each pulse of lightning brought memories rushing back. The cramped, sour-smelling courtroom, her own voice ringing out as she condemned Elias Rourke to die, the haunted look in his eyes. He never once pleaded, never begged, just stared at her, silent and steady, like someone who'd already lost too much to fear anything else. But that was 8 years ago. 8 years since Marissa, a federal prosecutor with a reputation for being unflinching, had won her biggest case, and then watched her entire world crumble. Tonight, though, the guilt was different. It felt physical, heavy. She could almost hear it, like the pounding of the rain, like the anxious pacing of Icarus behind her. She reached out, trembling, and flicked off the ignition. The sudden silence inside the cab made her heart race even faster. She could feel the storm pressing in, thickening the air, as if daring her to move. Her phone buzzed. A text from Janelle. "You sure about this? There's still time to turn around. Don't go alone." Marissa hesitated, thumbs hovering. Janelle Cruz was her best friend, her anchor, the only person who stuck by her after the collapse, after the breakdown, the media frenzy, and the shame of resignation. Janelle, who'd saved Icarus from the slaughterhouse auction, who'd dug into files nobody else cared to read, and now, Janelle, who'd risked everything to bring her this new evidence. Marissa swallowed, unable to answer. Instead, she looked into the rearview mirror at the trailer. Icarus was almost invisible in the gloom, a flash of white and a restless shape. He stomped, sensing her tension, and the trailer creaked. Another flash of memory, not from the case, but from that broken auction house last spring. Rows of horses, skin stretched over bones, heads hung low in defeat. Icarus, battered and scarred, his white coat marked by old wounds. But his eyes had caught hers, wild, fierce, refusing to surrender. She'd known in that moment, before the auctioneer's gavel even fell, that she couldn't leave him behind. They were both lost causes, or so the world said. Maybe that's why she trusted him now. Her thoughts snapped back to the prison. Dawn was only hours away, and unless she did something, Elias Rourke would die at first light. She gripped the steering wheel again, staring out at the highway swallowed by rain and darkness. 8 years ago, it had all seemed so clear, black and white, guilt and innocence. But now, after everything she'd seen, after Janelle's late-night calls and frantic research, it was a storm of doubt. What if she'd been wrong? What if the conviction was built on lies? She closed her eyes and let the memories play out, as they had 1,000 times before. The prosecutor's table stacked with glossy photos, blood-stained boots, testimony about hoofprints in the dust. A single witness who'd claimed to see Elias running from the scene. A jury, desperate for an answer, any answer, in the wake of a corporate heiress's brutal murder. Marissa's own closing argument, clipped, icy, certain. She'd built her career on never wavering. But now, with the prison so close she could smell the desert air tinged with ozone and fear, she felt as if she were about to drown. A peal of thunder jolted her. She opened her eyes. Icarus whinnied again, louder this time, and she felt the urgency. It was time to move. She owed that much, to Elias, to herself, and to the ghost of the truth that refused to let her rest. She reached for the folder on the passenger seat, water-stained and frayed at the edges. Inside were copies of the evidence Janelle had found, a missing hoofprint analysis, emails from the original farrier, a transcript of a call between the ranch foreman and someone only identified as M. Every piece pointed to a botched investigation, a rush to judgment, and a scapegoat. Elias hadn't just lost his freedom, he'd lost his voice, his future, maybe even his life. Marissa's hand shook as she dialed her phone. After 3 rings, Janelle answered, voice tight with anxiety. "You there? Did you make it?" "Yeah, I'm here. It's worse than I thought." A pause. "You see the lights? They're already on. The guards are prepping for the execution." "Janelle, what if I'm too late?" "You're not. Listen, remember what I told you about the lead witness vanishing, about Luis Ortega's story? It all lines up. They railroaded him, Marissa. But you have to get inside. You have to make them listen." Marissa closed her eyes, nodded. "I know. I just hope it's enough." Thunder rumbled again. She ended the call, shoved the phone into her jacket pocket, and pulled up the hood. Stepping into the storm, she was instantly soaked, the rain cold and sharp, like needles on her skin. She strode back to the trailer and pressed her forehead to the door, breathing in the warm, earthy scent of Icarus. "We've both been through hell, boy," she whispered, "but not tonight. Not again." Inside the trailer, Icarus snickered softly, as if understanding. His presence calmed her, gave her the strength she needed to walk up to the prison gates. A guard stepped out, startled by the sight of a woman leading a huge white stallion through the deluge. Marissa drew herself up, holding the evidence folder high. "I'm Marissa Hale," she shouted over the rain. "Former prosecutor, case 18-427. I need to see the warden. It's about Elias Rourke. I have proof he's innocent." The guard hesitated, then nodded, radioing ahead. Marissa stood there, drenched, lightning flashing overhead, with Icarus standing steady by her side. In that moment, she knew there was no turning back. The storm wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside her, too. But this time, she would not let it win. Rain continued to lash the battered roof of the correctional facility as Marissa stood in the fluorescent-lit visitor processing area, water dripping from her coat and pooling around her boots. Every second felt like an hour. Her stomach twisted into knots of anxiety, guilt, and determination. At the far end of the corridor, a tired correctional officer slid a clipboard toward her, barely glancing up. "You say you're a former prosecutor, Miss Hale? And you're here at this hour with a horse?" The question hung in the air, absurd and sharp. Marissa braced herself, refusing to let the embarrassment show. "I'm here about Elias Rourke's execution. There's evidence the case was manipulated. The horse, he's part of it." The guard grunted, unimpressed, and shuffled off to radio the warden. Marissa exhaled, hugging the battered folder to her chest. She could hear Icarus outside in the rain, his presence grounding her. Even here, in the belly of the system she'd once trusted, the horse made her feel less alone. While she waited, Marissa's mind drifted back to the life she'd been forced to build after her resignation. A life she'd tried to make simple, routine, and safe. Each day began with the heavy aroma of hay and the quiet shuffling of hooves. The stable on the outskirts of town was run by her only true friend, Janelle Cruz, whose sharp wit and stubborn compassion had kept Marissa from falling apart completely. Janelle's rescue operation was small, barely scraping by, but her commitment to discarded horses was legendary. She had a knack for finding hope in hopeless places. That's how she'd found Icarus, a giant white stallion with a rough past, a body marked by scars and neglect. No one had believed the horse was worth saving. No one but Janelle, and by extension, Marissa, who had slowly come to depend on both of them more than she'd ever admit. Those quiet mornings with Janelle and Icarus were the only peace Marissa knew. But even in the gentle rituals of cleaning stalls and mending fences, doubt crept in like a chill wind. She'd lost everything that once defined her: her job, her reputation, her confidence in the law. The world moved on, but Marissa felt stuck, haunted by the faces of people she'd helped condemn, especially one face in particular. Elias Rourke. He'd been homeless, a wanderer who drifted from ranch to ranch looking for odd jobs and shelter. He kept mostly to himself, speaking little, but had a quiet dignity that made people uncomfortable. When the murder happened, a corporate heiress found dead in a tangle of hoofprints and blood, it was too easy to point the finger at the outsider. Marissa, then at the height of her career, built the case brick by brick, certain she was serving justice. But now, looking back, she saw the cracks she'd ignored. The missing witness, the gaps in the timeline, the way key evidence disappeared from the file room. She'd told herself the system worked. She'd told herself she was right. But doubt had a way of growing in the dark. The security door buzzed, jerking Marissa back to the present. The warden, a heavy-set man with deep-set eyes and the permanent scowl of someone who'd seen too much, stepped into the room. "Miss Hale, you've got 5 minutes. That's all the governor's office authorized. You better make it count." She nodded, throat tight, and followed him through a maze of sterile hallways, the folder clutched like a life raft. They passed holding cells and guard posts, everything sterile and humming with the low-grade threat of violence. "Do you really think you can stop this?" the warden muttered as they walked. "I have to try," Marissa said. "If there's a chance Elias is innocent, then it's on all of us." The warden eyed her sideways, then grunted. "You weren't so hesitant 8 years ago." The words stung. Marissa pushed on, entering a cramped office where a secretary eyed her warily from behind a fortress of paperwork. She handed over the evidence, heart pounding as she explained. "This is a hoofprint analysis that was never submitted at trial. The type of horse involved doesn't match Elias's work history. There's also a list of employees who vanished after the investigation, including the lead witness. And a farrier named Luis Ortega saw a white horse the night of the murder. None of this was ever considered." The warden took the folder, flipping through the pages. "It's not my call. If you want to stop an execution, you need the governor, not me. You have hours, at most." Marissa felt the futility pressing in on her, but she refused to let go. "Then please, at least notify the governor's office. Someone has to listen." Back at the stable, the world was quieter. The storm was moving off, thunder rolling in the distance. Janelle paced the hay-strewn aisle, phone pressed to her ear. She had a wall of notes tacked up beside the tack room, witness names, timelines, grainy printouts from the case files she'd managed to scrape together. When Marissa called with an update, Janelle listened in tense silence. "How bad is it?" Janelle finally asked. "I don't know. The warden's not unsympathetic, but he's got protocol. I think he believes me, but that won't save Elias. No. We need something stronger, something that can't be ignored." Janelle looked over at Icarus, who stood calmly chewing hay, his gaze fixed on the door as if expecting Marissa's return. Janelle ran a hand down his scarred neck, feeling the power beneath the battered hide. Maybe it's time to talk to Luis Ortega again. If he saw a white horse that night, and it wasn't Icarus, who was it? Marissa nodded, pacing her small apartment, staring at the files spread across her kitchen table. She picked up a transcript from her closing argument, her voice echoing in her head. So much certainty, so little room for doubt. She let herself remember Elias's face as the verdict was read. No tears, no outbursts, just a resignation that bordered on serenity. But she'd seen his hand tremble. Just once, barely noticeable. Janelle's voice broke through her reverie. "I know you're beating yourself up, Mar. But if we're going to get justice for Elias, we have to focus. Regret doesn't help him now. Truth does." Marissa took a deep breath and nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right. I'll get in touch with Ava Harlan, the equine therapist who questioned the evidence. If anyone can help us find the holes in this story, it's her." The storm outside eased into a gentle drizzle, as if exhausted, but inside Marissa the weight of doubt pressed heavier than ever. She knew that whatever comfort she'd found in her exile, it was over now. She'd reopen the wound, and it would not close until she found the truth, no matter how ugly or dangerous it turned out to be. In the darkness, Icarus whinnied softly, the sound a quiet promise. They would not run from the storm, not this time. Together, they would ride straight into its heart. The dawn after the storm brought a fragile, metallic stillness to Santa Fe. Marissa barely slept, her mind replaying old arguments, new doubts, and flashes of a prison cell bathed in harsh white light. By sunrise, the world outside had been washed clean, but inside her apartment, the cluttered table, the coffee gone cold, and the evidence files remained just as tangled and unresolved. Janelle arrived early, dark hair tucked beneath a battered ball cap, eyes sharp with purpose. She dumped a tote bag full of file folders, USB drives, and dog-eared notebooks on the table. "Did you get anywhere with the warden?" she asked, sliding into the nearest chair. Marissa shook her head. "He took the folder, promised to contact the governor's office, but it's bureaucracy and protocol. I don't know if it's enough." Janelle nodded, opening her laptop. "We don't have time for enough. We need something that explodes the whole story, something nobody can ignore." Her fingers moved fast over the keyboard, pulling up old news clips, scanned police reports, and witness lists she'd cobbled together over months. Marissa watched her, feeling that familiar mixture of gratitude and guilt. It was Janelle who'd found the first crack, a missing farrier's report buried at the bottom of the evidence inventory. It was Janelle who'd pointed out that the lead witness in Elias's case had vanished weeks after the verdict, her apartment abandoned, her mailbox overflowing. The official story moved out of state. But Janelle never trusted official stories. Marissa reached for the storage box that had lived under her bed for years, untouched. She pried it open, the stale air inside thick with memories, trial transcripts, handwritten notes, and at the very bottom, a sealed manila envelope she didn't recognize. She slid it out, hands trembling. Janelle noticed. "What's that?" "I don't know. I think it's the old evidence review from the crime scene, the hoofprint analysis." They cleared space on the table, spreading out the faded sheets. The report was technical, dense with measurements and jargon, but one detail jumped out. The horse that left prints at the scene had a distinctive conformation, an unusually wide stride, and an old injury that made the left hoof splay outward. Marissa remembered how, during the trial, the prosecution claimed those prints belonged to a horse Elias had worked with on a neighboring ranch. The match had seemed airtight, but now, looking at the photos, Marissa's breath caught. The shoe print didn't match the type of horses Elias typically worked with. Stocky bay Mustangs, not tall white stallions. Janelle's eyes went wide. "Wait, remember what Luis Ortega said when I tracked him down at that horse show outside Taos? He was the farrier who worked both the victim's ranch and the neighbor's. He told me there was a white horse, a big one, in the paddock that night, but nobody wanted to hear about it." Marissa shivered, the pieces beginning to shift. So what if the killer used a horse nobody expected? What if the prints don't belong to any horse in Elias's care? Janelle nodded, fired up. "And the white horse, what if it's like Icarus, scarred, big, not in the official records, maybe even off the books?" A silence fell between them as the implications settled. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant whinny of Icarus from the stable. Marissa took out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Ava Harlan, the equine therapist who'd been fired from the original case. Ava had questioned the consistency of the animal evidence during the trial, but her testimony had been dismissed as speculative. After the verdict, she lost her job, then her license, then disappeared from the news entirely. Marissa expected voicemail. Instead, Ava answered, voice cautious but clear. "Hello?" "Ava, it's Marissa Hale." A tense pause. "What do you want?" "I need your help. I think I made a mistake." "A big one? About Elias Rourke?" "Yes." Another pause, then a sigh. "Meet me at the old horse therapy center, off Highway 14. "I'll come." Off the record. Janelle gave Marissa a look. "She's in?" "Yeah, but she's skittish." Who could blame her? She got chewed up and spit out just like Elias. By midday, the three women met at the abandoned therapy facility, weeds curling up through cracks in the concrete, the wind rattling the old tin roof. Icarus came too. Marissa insisted on trailering him, not willing to leave him alone with her nerves this raw. Ava arrived last, a faded ball cap pulled low, and a leather satchel slung over her shoulder. Ava took one look at the old hoofprint report and snorted. They wanted a match, so they got a match. But it was never that simple. I told the sheriff those weren't Elias's horses. They ignored me. She traced a scar on Icarus's leg, comparing it to the splayed hoof in the photos. You see this? Horses like him, damaged with a wide gait, leave a specific print. You'd have to know what you're looking for to see it. Janelle leaned in. So if someone used a horse like Icarus that night, and it was off the books, they could pin it on Elias, and nobody would ask questions. Ava nodded. Exactly. And if the lead witness vanished, there's no one to say otherwise, unless you can find the horse. Marissa stared at Icarus, heart pounding. But what if the real killer used a horse just like him? Same breed, same stride, same scars. Janelle grinned, fierce and determined. Then we find out whose horse it was. And we prove Elias was set up. They spent the afternoon poring over the records Ava had managed to keep. A battered notebook filled with registry numbers, medical records, and notes on every horse that had passed through the victim's family ranch. Icarus paced outside, head high, nostrils flaring as if sensing old secrets rising. Ava paused, flipping a page. Here, there was a white stallion, registered under a different name, transferred off the ranch the week after the murder. Paper trail gets fuzzy. Might have been sold at auction, might have gone to another rancher entirely. Janelle snapped photos of everything. We need to find that horse, and Luis Ortega. He's the last person who saw all these animals up close. As the sun dropped behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the women made a pact. They would not stop, not even for threats, not even if the system pushed back. If there was a way to free Elias, to make right what had been twisted, they would find it. And if the truth hid in the dust of old hoofprints, they would chase it, together. Outside, Icarus lifted his head to the evening breeze, muscles rippling under his scars. For the first time since the nightmare began, Marissa felt hope flicker, fragile but alive. The storm was far from over, but for the first time in 8 years, she could see the path ahead. And this time, she would not look away. A pale morning sun crept over the horizon, streaking the battered windows of the abandoned horse training facility with streaks of gold and rust. Marissa steered her truck down a rutted gravel drive, heart thumping as the old ranch came into view. It had been left to rot since the scandal, a sprawling network of empty paddocks, sagging fences and barns half swallowed by weeds. Even the air felt heavy with secrets. Janelle, riding shotgun, kept her eyes peeled, her camera and notepad ready for anything. In the trailer, Icarus shifted uneasily, his instinct alert to every strange scent and echo. Ava arrived just behind them in her beat-up Subaru, already tense, clutching her leather satchel like a shield. The three women exchanged wary glances as they gathered at the main gate, its chain twisted but unlocked. "Ready?" Janelle muttered, glancing at Marissa. "Not even a little," Marissa replied, voice wry but determined. "But let's go before I lose my nerve." They led Icarus onto the property, the big stallion snorting as he took in the long-forgotten smells. The old stable loomed ahead, its roof bowed, doors sagging on their hinges. Inside, the shadows seemed to cling to every corner. Dust motes danced in the light, disturbed by the soft thud of Icarus's hooves. He hesitated at the threshold, muscles tensing, then, without prompting, strode forward, ears flicking as if drawn by something only he could sense. "He's spooked," Ava whispered, her eyes tracking the horse. "But he's not backing down." They followed as Icarus led them down a dark aisle lined with empty stalls, past broken buckets and faded plaques still bearing the names of horses long gone. Suddenly, he stopped. Head up, nostrils flaring at a boarded-up tack room at the far end of the barn. Marissa's pulse jumped. "You feel that?" she said, glancing at Janelle, who nodded. Icarus pawed at the cracked concrete, stomping once, then twice, as if insisting they pay attention. Ava knelt and pried at a loose floorboard near the threshold. It groaned but lifted, revealing a shallow, dirt-caked void. Something metallic gleamed in the half-light. Ava reached in and pulled out a battered lockbox, its surface streaked with age. Janelle shined her flashlight over the lid. "You think it's—" "Only one way to find out," Marissa replied. She fished a hairpin from her pocket, and after a few tense minutes of fumbling, popped the lock. Inside lay a jumble of objects: an old bridal tag, a yellowed registration card, and a cheap plastic flash drive. The bridal tag read, "Elias Property," but underneath, the registry ID matched not with any horse Elias had worked with, but a different animal altogether. A white stallion, recently removed from the ranch records after the murder. Janelle's hands shook as she snapped photos. "This is it. They tried to bury this." Marissa carefully pulled the flash drive from the box. "Let's see what's on this." They crowded around Janelle's laptop, booting it up on the tack room's dusty workbench. The drive whirred, and a single video file appeared. With a click, Elias's face filled the screen, tear-stained, desperate, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "I was there to protect her," he sobbed, eyes darting off camera. "I swear it wasn't me. They made it look like I ran, but I didn't. I tried to help." The women sat in stunned silence. Elias's pain, raw and unfiltered, cut through the years. Marissa bit her lip, regret sharp as a knife. "He wasn't just silent," Ava whispered. "He was screaming, but nobody listened." As the video ended, Marissa took a shaky breath. This is enough to open an official review. The registry card, the bridal tag, the confession. Someone tried to erase every trace that could clear him. Janelle scrolled through the registration logs, following the trail of the white stallion. It was transferred out right after the murder. The paper trail dead ends at a shell company. Somebody wanted this horse gone. "And wanted Elias to take the fall?" Ava finished. Icarus nickered softly, brushing Marissa's shoulder with his nose. She turned and stroked his mane, feeling the old scars beneath her fingers. "You think whoever did this is still watching us?" Janelle asked, voice low. Marissa glanced at the door, suddenly uneasy. If they tried this hard to hide the truth, they might do anything to keep it buried. "We need to get these files somewhere safe," Ava said, gathering the evidence back into the lockbox. "And get word to the governor before the execution clock runs out." As they stepped outside, a chill breeze swept the yard. Marissa looked back at the tack room, the weight of everything they'd found pressing down on her shoulders. For a brief moment, she caught a glimmer of movement in the tree line. Someone watching? Or just her nerves? She made a mental note to check the truck for tampering before they left. They loaded Icarus and the evidence, their adrenaline only beginning to fade. On the ride back, Janelle broke the silence. "When this goes public, whoever did this will come after us. Are you ready for that?" Marissa nodded, jaw set. "We can't stop now. We owe Elias, and ourselves, more than that." They didn't see the black sedan parked a quarter-mile up the road, engine idling, as they pulled away. But Icarus, peering through the trailer window, stared straight into its shadowed windshield, ears pinned, eyes defiant. Inside, a gloved hand gripped a phone, dialing a number no one wanted to hear ring again. As the women disappeared into the brightening day, the figure made a promise. If they rode any closer to the truth, someone would make sure their trail ended, just like before. Back at the stable, the three women huddled around the evidence, nerves jangling. Marissa's phone buzzed. A blocked number. No message, just static on the line. "That's not a warning," Janelle muttered. "That's a threat." Icarus stood between them, and the dark, broad, and unwavering, the living echo of all the lives discarded for someone else's convenience. For the first time, Marissa realized the danger wasn't just for her. It was for all of them. But as Icarus pressed his scarred head into her shoulder, she felt a surge of courage. They had come too far to back down. The truth was out there, tangled in hoof prints, registry tags, and bruised memories. Together, they would ride straight at it, whatever the cost. Night pressed down hard over the stables, a suffocating, restless dark, punctuated only by the distant hum of highway traffic and the creak of wind against the old barn roof. Marissa hadn't let herself sleep, not after the discoveries of the day. The bridal tag, the registry fraud, the footage of Elias, everything now locked in a fireproof box under her bed. Still, she knew fear could not be hidden by locks or steel. Danger had its own way of finding you, especially when you rode too close to the truth. She checked the locks on the barn a third time before heading back inside, every step crackling on the gravel, every shadow a possible threat. Janelle was in the kitchen, hunched over her phone, scanning social media and local news for any sign of a leak or an impending disaster. "Governor's office hasn't called," she muttered as Marissa entered. "If we don't get a response by sunrise, we take this to the press. I don't care about protocol anymore." Marissa nodded grimly, her eyes falling on the framed photo of Icarus on the counter, taken the first day he arrived at the stable, still wild-eyed and battered. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for them to slip up. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a single line of text from an unknown number. "You ride too close to the truth. No threat, no signature, just a promise." Marissa's hands went cold. She didn't show Janelle. She knew it would only sharpen the fear already cutting through the room. Meanwhile, outside, Ava checked the paddock gates by flashlight. The horses were restless, eyes rolling white in the darkness, and even Icarus seemed agitated, stomping and snorting as if trying to warn her. Ava doubled back to the main barn, pausing at the side door. For a moment she thought she heard footsteps in the gravel. When she spun around, the only thing behind her was the low fence and the wind moving through the mesquite. But the feeling lingered. Eyes in the dark, intent and unblinking. By midnight, the tension inside the stable had become unbearable. Janelle, unable to sit still, volunteered to exercise Icarus, if nothing else to burn off her own nervous energy. Marissa hesitated, but Janelle flashed her a tight, reassuring smile. "If anyone messes with us tonight, they'll regret picking on a girl with a 1,000-pound backup." She tugged on her boots and led Icarus out into the dimly lit training ring, the big stallion tossing his head and sidestepping with uncharacteristic skittishness. The world felt charged, like the air before a storm, every sound magnified and sinister. Janelle started Icarus on a slow circle around the arena, talking to him softly, her breath steaming in the cold. The stallion's muscles bunched and rippled under her hands, his eyes never leaving the shadows beyond the ring. The wind carried the faint scent of gasoline, strange, out of place. Janelle stopped, frowning. That's when she heard the crunch of boots behind her. She whirled, but before she could react, a hooded figure lunged from behind the equipment shed, something glinting in his hand. Icarus shrieked and reared, nearly pulling the lead rope from Janelle's grasp. The attacker lunged, grabbing her arm. Instinctively, Janelle let go of the rope and swung at the figure's face. Icarus reared higher, striking at the man with a steel-shod hoof. It was chaos, a blur of movement, breath, and panic. The man staggered, cursing, but another stepped from the shadows, this one with a syringe. Janelle fought back, knees and elbows, but the second man managed to jab the needle into her thigh. Icarus screamed and lunged again, driving the first man backward, but then he too was hit with a tranquilizer dart. His legs buckled. He crashed to his knees, still fighting, still trying to reach Janelle. Everything spun. Janelle's vision blurred as she tried to crawl to Icarus, but her limbs felt heavy, useless. The world faded to a ringing, terrifying black. When Marissa heard the noise, the shriek of a horse, the shouts, she burst out the back door, flashlight beam sweeping wildly. She found the empty arena, the gate swinging open, hoofprints gouged deep into the sand, and a dropped lead rope. Heart hammering, she called for Janelle, for Icarus, but there was no answer, only the hollow echo of her own panic. Inside the barn, Ava was already calling 911, voice trembling but steady. "My friend, she's missing. And our horse, someone took them. Please, hurry." Marissa ran to the street, scanning for taillights, for any sign of a van or trailer, but there was nothing. The only evidence was a set of fresh tire tracks in the mud, leading away from the stable, swallowed by the night. She returned to the barn, where Ava tried to comfort the remaining horses. "They took Janelle," Marissa said, voice raw. "They took Icarus, too." Ava's eyes were wide with horror. "They know we're onto them. This is a warning. They'll come for you next." Marissa's mind raced. She grabbed her phone, ready to call the police again, but froze when she saw what was scratched into the pane on her driver's side window. A jagged warning carved with a knife. You ride too close to the truth. Same as the text, but now, real, tangible. She stared at the message, shivering. It was then that her old instincts, the ones honed by years in the law, took over. She locked every door, checked every window. We can't trust the police to handle this, she said quietly. Not when they could be in on it. We have to go higher. We need someone with the authority and the guts to push this through. Ava hesitated. Who? My old mentor, Marissa said, determination flaring in her eyes. Retired Judge William Harrow. He still has connections. He can get us an emergency hearing, maybe even reach the governor directly. It's risky. He's not exactly fond of lost causes these days. Ava nodded. Do it, before they come back. As Marissa dialed Harrow's number, Ava gathered what was left of their evidence and hid it in a different location, just in case. When the old judge picked up, his voice was gravelly and suspicious. Marissa, you know what time it is? She didn't waste words. I need your help. It's life or death. Elias Rourke. I have proof of a setup, but someone's trying to kill us to keep it buried. Please, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't real. A long silence, then a weary sigh. Meet me at my house in an hour, and don't bring any tales with you. Marissa hung up, adrenaline giving her new strength. She and Ava gathered everything, evidence, keys, a flashlight, and pepper spray, and slipped out the back. The night was cold, but resolve burned hot inside her. They would fight back. She would save Janelle and Icarus if it killed her. As she drove into the night, taillights vanishing into the black, she whispered a promise into the dark. Hold on, Janelle. Hold on, Icarus. I'm coming for you both. Behind her, the stable stood silent, the message on her car window catching the moonlight like a curse. But Marissa felt no fear now, only fury and purpose. The system that once gave her power now wanted to destroy her, but she would not break. Tonight, the reins had been cut. But tomorrow, she would gather every thread and pull until the truth unraveled, no matter what it cost. For the first time in months, Marissa drove through the city with her mind not on escape, but on rescue and survival. The city lights flashed by, blurred with fatigue and adrenaline, her grip so tight on the steering wheel her knuckles shone pale. Every red light felt like a threat, every shadowed alley, a warning. Beside her, Ava scanned the rear view, nerves wound tight as wire. They said little, both women locked in their private storms, one determined, the other on the brink of fear. Judge Harrow's house stood at the end of a long, curving driveway, half hidden behind tall cottonwoods. The porch lights were off, but a single lamp burned in the study window. Marissa rang the bell, heart pounding. The old judge answered in robe and slippers, his face grave and worn by years of disappointment, but the eyes behind his glasses still sharp as a blade. He waved them in without a word, gestured toward the heavy oak desk stacked with legal briefs and unopened mail. You have 5 minutes, he grunted, pouring coffee with shaking hands. Make it count. Marissa spread the evidence on his desk, the bridal tag, the registry records, the flash drive with Elias's broken confession. Ava added her notebook, her voice low and urgent as she explained about the missing witness, the suspicious sale of the white stallion, the abduction of Janelle and Icarus. Harrow listened, silent except for the occasional click of his pen. He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't challenge their logic. He simply listened, and as the story poured out, rushed, desperate, terrified, Marissa saw a flicker of something familiar in his eyes. The old stubborn drive to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. When they finished, he sat back and stared at them. You know, this is a political grenade, don't you? Marissa nodded. If you don't help, Elias dies, and 2 more, Janelle and Icarus, may already be lost. Harrow sighed, reached for his phone. Give me the governor's aide's number, and pray she's still awake. Within the hour, Judge Harrow had mobilized a small legal miracle. He faxed the emergency appeal to the governor's office, including every scrap of evidence in an affidavit swearing to the danger faced by Marissa, Ava, and their missing friends. The legal team promised to review the case before dawn. There was nothing left to do but wait. But Marissa could not wait. While Harrow made calls, Marissa excused herself, stepping out into the cool night, mind racing with worry for Janelle and Icarus. She pictured them. Janelle, stubborn and sharp-tongued even in fear. Icarus, the big stallion refusing to submit even as he faced threats he couldn't understand. Her chest hurt with helplessness. But then her phone buzzed. A signal from the small tracking device sewn into Icarus's saddle blanket, something Janelle had insisted on after hearing stories of horses disappearing in the desert. She tapped the app, watched as a single blue dot flickered on the edge of town, miles from the stable, deep in the rangeland near the state highway. A wave of hope crashed through her. "Ava!" she called, sprinting inside. Icarus's tracker just pinged. "He's still moving." Judge Harrow insisted they wait for the authorities, but Marissa refused. "If we wait, we lose them forever. If they find out we're tracking, they'll get rid of the horse and—" She couldn't finish the thought. They drove fast, headlights cutting through the deserted back roads, adrenaline fueling every mile. At the edge of a dark field, they found a battered livestock trailer abandoned on the shoulder, its doors swinging in the wind. Marissa rushed forward, nearly slipping on the damp grass. The trailer's lock hung open, the inside empty except for a streak of white hair and a broken halter. Suddenly, in the moonlight, Icarus appeared at the far end of the field, limping but upright, mane wild, eyes wide and searching. He'd kicked his way out, Marissa realized with awe, using the last of his strength to break free. Ava gasped, sprinted after the horse, whispering soothing nonsense as she fumbled for the emergency kit she always carried. Marissa caught up, her hands trembling as she touched Icarus's sweat-soaked neck, feeling for wounds. There were bruises, cuts from rope burns, but nothing fatal. Icarus nuzzled her shoulder, exhausted but alive. Tied to the underside of his saddle, hidden in a waterproof pouch, Marissa found a USB drive, Janelle's doing, without a doubt. She held it up in the moonlight, hope rising in her chest. She hid something here, something they couldn't find. They raced back to the truck, plugged the drive into Ava's laptop. The screen flickered, and a single video file opened. The image was grainy, the sound muffled, but the face was unmistakable. Martin Gainsley, a powerful rival rancher, drunk and laughing at a crowded party. "She was gonna blow it all up," he slurred, waving a half-empty bottle. "So I found someone easy to blame. Poor bastard never saw it coming." Laughter erupted around him, but his words were clear, an open confession of conspiracy and murder, the truth they'd been desperate to find. Marissa's hands shook as she uploaded the video to Judge Harrow, then immediately called the governor's office herself, voice steady but urgent as she explained. "This is proof. The real killer confessed. You have to stop the execution, please, before it's too late." The reply was curt but not unkind. "We're sending a legal team to the prison now. Stay put and keep that evidence safe. State police are en route to your location for protection." Ava, finally letting herself believe, sagged against the tailgate, tears streaming down her cheeks. Icarus stood beside her, battered but proud, as if he knew he had helped save more than himself. Marissa stroked his face, her gratitude almost painful. "You're a miracle, you know that? You saved us all." But her joy was muted by fear for Janelle, still missing, possibly hurt, possibly worse. She pressed the governor's aide for news. "We'll send a search party. Your friend's phone last pinged from a barn north of the highway. Stay safe." Back at Judge Harrow's, the phone rang just before sunrise. The governor's legal team had reviewed the evidence. A helicopter was dispatched to the prison with the emergency stay. "It's not over," the aide said, "but you may have just saved an innocent life." Marissa collapsed on the porch steps, finally allowing herself to breathe. The wind shifted, carrying the first hints of dawn. Icarus grazed nearby, battered but standing tall, a living testament to defiance, loyalty, and truth. For Marissa, this wasn't victory, not yet. It was only the chance to finish the race. But for the first time since that stormy night, hope wasn't just a memory. It was real. It had a name, and it stood beside her, scarred but undefeated. The sun had barely begun to rise when the phone call came, shattering the tense quiet that had settled over Judge Harrow's house. The voice on the other end was brisk, almost breathless with urgency. One of the governor's legal aides, confirming what Marissa and Ava had spent the night praying for. "We've seen the video. It's enough for a stay. We're en route to the prison with the order, but you need to get here as fast as possible with all the physical evidence. The governor wants this delivered by hand. No mistakes, no delays. We can't risk interference." Marissa didn't hesitate. She snatched up the files, the battered flash drive, Janelle's secret video, and the bridal tag, stuffing them into a messenger bag. Icarus, despite his battered state, seemed to sense the tension. When she threw open the trailer door, he lifted his head, stamping the ground, eyes alight with the same unspoken urgency. Ava helped saddle him, their movements practiced, hands shaking with adrenaline. Judge Harrow handed Marissa a sealed letter for the warden and pressed his hand on her shoulder. "Don't stop for anything. You ride like lives depend on it." Because they do. They sped away from the house, the rising sun casting long, wild shadows across the empty roads. State troopers met them at the edge of town, 2 cars flashing their lights and cutting a path through morning traffic. Every second was precious. The legal team at the prison was already preparing to begin the process, but bureaucracy and habit moved slow, and the execution chamber was a place that thrived on the routine of death. As they tore through the city outskirts, Marissa's mind flicked through memories of Elias, his silent endurance, his refusal to beg, the look in his eyes as he was sentenced to die for something he didn't do. All the years she'd tried to bury that face, to justify her certainty. Now she rode for his life, haunted by the truth, and spurred by something like redemption. Icarus traveled beside them in the trailer, quiet and watchful. Ava, riding in the back seat, checked her phone for updates from the search party looking for Janelle. Every 5 minutes, she redialed, fingers trembling, hope and dread warring on her face. "They haven't found her yet," she muttered, tears threatening to spill. Marissa reached back and squeezed her hand, the gesture a promise. "We'll bring him home. We'll bring them all home." The convoy raced toward the correctional facility, sirens screaming, state police waving them through every intersection. At the same time, overhead, the pounding chop of helicopter blades echoed across the city, the governor's chopper, carrying the stay of execution, flying straight for the prison gates. The drama was playing out on 2 fronts, the fight in the air and the fight on the ground. At last, the massive concrete walls of the prison rose ahead, glinting in the morning light. Armed guards blocked the entrance, eyes wary as the convoy approached. Marissa stepped out, pulling Icarus from the trailer, the big white stallion standing tall despite his exhaustion, his scars gleaming in the early sun. The governor's legal team was already there, waving paperwork, shouting into cell phones. A television news van lurked outside the gate, cameras rolling, drawn by rumors of a last-minute legal miracle. Marissa strode up to the warden, thrusting the messenger bag into his hands. "This is the proof. Registry fraud, confession, physical evidence that points to Martin Gainsley. You cannot kill Elias Rourke. He's innocent." The warden's eyes flicked from her to the stallion, then to the troopers at her side. For a moment, Marissa feared he would resist, that the machine of justice would grind on regardless. But then he nodded, voice thick. "Come with me. If this checks out, I'll halt the execution myself." Inside the prison, chaos reigned. Lawyers pored over documents, cell phones rang, and the governor's helicopter landed on the exercise yard, a team in suits emerging with the official order. Every second counted. In a small room near the execution chamber, Marissa, Ava, and the governor's aide huddled with the legal team, watching the footage of Martin's drunken confession, reviewing the hoofprint analysis, the registry ID, the bridal tag. All the evidence that had been buried or ignored for years. A frantic call came in from the search party. Janelle had been found. She'd been dumped in an old barn 40 miles north, bruised and groggy, but alive. Her phone destroyed, but her spirit unbroken. Ava sobbed with relief, burying her face in Marissa's shoulder. She's alive. They found her. The legal team finished their review, and the warden himself took the paperwork, running for the execution chamber with the governor's signed order. Marissa and Ava waited in a stunned, shaking silence, every nerve taut, every heartbeat a drum of hope and fear. Icarus stood outside the window, his massive frame unmistakable even among the swirl of uniforms and cameras. Inside the death chamber, Elias Rourke sat shackled and silent, head bowed as the technicians prepared the needle. Years of solitude had stooped his shoulders, but even now he refused to weep. The doors burst open. The warden, breathless, waving the governor's stay, shouted, "Stop! Stop everything!" The scene froze. Doctors, guards, witnesses all staring. Elias lifted his head, confusion and disbelief flickering across his features. The process was halted. He was led away, hands still bound, but hope sparking in his eyes. The news swept through the facility. Execution stayed, new evidence discovered, the real killer named. Outside, Marissa held Icarus's bridle, trembling with relief and exhaustion. Reporters rushed her for statements, but she refused to speak, watching instead as the prison gates opened and Elias was let out, blinking into the sun, alive and free for the first time in 8 years. The drama wasn't over. State troopers arrested Martin Gainsley at the airport, trying to flee the country with a suitcase full of cash and a fake passport. The story exploded across news channels, a conspiracy exposed, a system tested, and a group of unlikely heroes, a fallen prosecutor, a stubborn journalist, a disgraced equine therapist, and a scarred white stallion who refused to give up. Marissa stood at the prison gate, hand on Icarus's neck, the wind tangling her hair as dawn turned to day. In that moment, she knew nothing would ever be the same. She had been part of the system that nearly killed an innocent man. Now, she was part of the miracle that saved him. And in the depths of that knowledge, she felt something like forgiveness, hard-won, not just for Elias, but for herself. Ava joined her, tears still streaming. "We did it. We actually did it." Marissa smiled, shaky and fierce. "We're not done. We'll have to fight to keep him free. But we changed the ending. That's what matters." Icarus, the horse who'd been labeled beyond saving, pressed his head to her shoulder, steady and proud, and for the first time, Marissa truly believed that sometimes the path to justice isn't a straight line. Sometimes it takes a final, desperate gallop. Sometimes it takes faith in the broken, the forgotten, and the lost. Sometimes it takes a white horse. In the cramped waiting room just outside the execution chamber, time seemed suspended, every second stretching out, every sound magnified. Marissa and Ava pressed together on a hard plastic bench, hands locked so tightly their knuckles ached. Icarus, not allowed inside, waited just beyond the fence, his white head visible through a narrow window. The walls buzzed with anxious energy as the warden rushed past, governor's order in hand, leaving behind a ripple of whispered speculation among the guards and staff. The world, it seemed, was teetering on the edge of two possible futures, one ending in tragedy, the other in a miracle. Down the hallway, the execution team prepared for what should have been a routine procedure. The prison chaplain murmured prayers at Elias Rourke's side. Though Elias had never asked for faith or forgiveness, he simply sat, shoulders bowed, eyes distant, somewhere far beyond the white tile and fluorescent glare. The needle glinted beneath the harsh lights. Elias watched the clock, every tick a countdown to oblivion. Suddenly, chaos. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. The heavy doors swung open with a violence that rattled the entire chamber. The warden burst in, voice hoarse, sweat streaming down his brow as he waved the stay above his head. "Stop! The governor's office has issued a stay of execution. Do not proceed." His voice echoed off cinder block, the finality of it stunning the room into silence. The doctor holding the syringe froze mid-motion. The witnesses in the observation gallery gasped. Even the chaplain stared in disbelief. Slowly, the gravity of the moment registered, and hands moved away from the restraints, from the chemicals, from the button that would have ended a man's life. For a long second, Elias didn't move, his breath caught in his chest, too afraid to hope. Then a guard approached, hands trembling as he unlocked the cuffs. "You're not dying today, son," the man whispered, almost reverently. Elias let out a shuddering exhale, tears springing unbidden to his eyes. After 8 years of holding everything inside, his body shook with a tidal wave of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. He glanced at the window. Through the thick security glass, he caught a glimpse of something impossible. A scarred white stallion, standing motionless in the dawn. For the first time since his arrest, Elias allowed himself to believe in miracles. Outside, Marissa and Ava watched as officers led Elias, still dazed, through the maze of prison hallways and out into the cold light of morning. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, a sunrise unlike any other. The press swarmed at the gates, flashes popping, microphones thrust forward, the story already spinning out across the country. But Marissa ignored them all. Her entire world narrowed to the man emerging from the shadows. He was gaunt, his hair gone gray, eyes sunken and cautious, but he was alive. She stepped forward, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear anything else. Their eyes met. Elias hesitated, unsure. Marissa was the prosecutor who had sealed his fate, the face from his worst nightmares. But now she was here, hands empty, defenses stripped away, humility written in every line of her posture. She spoke softly, words nearly lost in the morning breeze. "Elias, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I should have seen the truth." For a moment, the world waited on his reply. He didn't speak. He simply reached out, and she took his hand, letting silence speak for all the words that were too heavy to say. Behind them, the media surged. State troopers formed a wall of protection as the legal team from the governor's office approached with paperwork and assurances. The process of freeing Elias was not instantaneous. He would spend hours in holding rooms, answering questions, submitting to medical exams, enduring the bureaucracy that had almost killed him. But the outcome was assured now. He was no longer a condemned man. While officials worked, Marissa, Ava, and Icarus waited on a patch of grass outside the gates. The stallion grazed, ears flicking as children pressed to the fence, drawn to his beauty and his scars. Marissa found herself crying, laughing, and shaking all at once, an emotional collapse after a lifetime of restraint. Ava hugged her, her own cheeks wet. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." "No," Marissa said, voice thick. "We did it, and so did he." She stroked Icarus's neck, remembering every day she'd doubted, every night she'd lain awake. He never gave up on us, even when I gave up on myself. The day wore on in a blur of interviews, signatures, and questions. News spread quickly. Martin Gainsley, the true killer, was arrested at the airport, caught with forged papers and cash as he tried to flee the country. His confession, captured on Janelle's hidden camera, became the linchpin in the unraveling of the whole conspiracy. Janelle herself was found in an abandoned barn by state troopers, battered but alive. She was rushed to the hospital, where Ava and Marissa joined her, the three women clinging to one another, tears and laughter mixing freely. Icarus was brought to the hospital parking lot, a hero in his own right. When Janelle first saw him, she sobbed uncontrollably, pressing her forehead to his. "You saved us, you beautiful, stubborn beast," she whispered. For a long while, no one said anything. Words couldn't capture the weight of what they'd endured or the miracle that had brought them through. As the sun set, casting long shadows over Santa Fe, the world slowly returned to its rhythm. But for Marissa, Elias, Ava, Janelle, and Icarus, nothing would ever be the same. They had survived a storm that threatened to drown them all, emerging not just alive, but changed. Guilt, shame, and pain had forged something new, redemption not given, but earned. And for the first time in years, Marissa allowed herself to hope. She watched as Elias, finally freed from his shackles, stepped into the fading light. The man who had been caged for a crime he did not commit paused by the fence, reaching out a trembling hand. Icarus lowered his head, letting the man touch his face. In that simple moment, a circle was closed, and a promise kept, to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. They had arrived with seconds to spare, but the real victory was measured not in minutes, but in the courage it took to face the darkness and ride through it together. Toward a dawn none of them thought they'd see. A month had passed since the day the world changed, since the sun rose on a prison yard in Santa Fe, and Elias Rourke stepped back from the brink. Spring had crept quietly across New Mexico, turning the hard red earth to gold and green, wildflowers blooming along the roadsides and in the neglected fields. In the distance, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains shimmered with the promise of new beginnings, their snowy caps reflected in the clear blue sky. For Marissa, each sunrise felt like a gift, a chance she never thought she'd deserve. The aftermath of the case lingered in headlines, talk shows, and podcasts for weeks. "Justice for the innocent," they declared. But the reality was quieter, more personal. Marissa kept her distance from the spotlight, refusing interviews, declining book deals. Her name would forever be linked to Elias's story, but she was determined that her next chapter would be lived in humility, reflection, and purpose, not in fame. Elias Rourke's release was not the end of his struggle. He walked out of prison with his back hunched, the habit of years spent trying to disappear. Reporters swarmed him at the gates, but he said nothing. Eyes fixed on the horizon, jaw clenched. It wasn't until he saw Icarus, waiting calmly beside Marissa in the parking lot, that something within him shifted. The big stallion whinnied softly, and Elias hesitated as if expecting the world to take this small comfort away. But Marissa only stepped aside, letting Elias approach the horse on his own terms. He reached out, fingers trembling, and brushed his hand along Icarus's scarred neck. For a moment the years fell away, the prison, the shame, the accusations. He closed his eyes and let himself feel safe for the first time in nearly a decade. When he opened them, Marissa was there, uncertain, waiting for his judgment. Elias looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of weary understanding. He simply held out his hand. She took it, and in that silent exchange, forgiveness began to bloom, not because words were spoken, but because both had learned how to listen. The days that followed were a process of slow, stubborn healing. Marissa stayed away from the city, living quietly at the stable. The old routines, feeding the horses, mucking stalls, tending to Icarus's wounds, became rituals of penance and renewal. Janelle, battered but unbroken, threw herself into her work with a new sense of mission. The headlines had made her a minor celebrity among investigative journalists, but she turned down every offer to return to the news cycle. Instead, she launched a podcast called Second Writers, dedicated to uncovering stories of wrongful conviction, corruption, and the unsung heroes, animal and human, who refused to let injustice win. Janelle's first episode was about Elias. She didn't shy away from the details, the mistakes, the cover-up, the pain. She told listeners about the white horse labeled too damaged to save, about the prosecutor who learned to doubt herself, about the friends who risked everything for the truth. She interviewed Ava, who had quietly regained her license and opened a small animal therapy clinic for at-risk youth. She spoke to Marissa, who shared her story not as a cautionary tale, but as a plea for every lawyer, every judge, every juror to question their own certainty. Elias's journey back to the world was slow, but steady. He spent his first days in silence, wandering the fields near the stable, hands buried in his pockets, face turned to the sun. The world felt too big, too loud, but Icarus seemed to sense his unease. The stallion followed Elias everywhere, never demanding, simply present. Gradually, Elias began to care for him, brushing his mane, cleaning his hooves, speaking soft words that no one else could hear. One afternoon, Marissa found Elias in the pasture, tears streaming down his cheeks as he stroked Icarus's flank. "I thought I'd forgotten how to feel anything but anger," Elias whispered, "but he reminds me that I can be gentle again, that I'm not broken, just bruised." Marissa nodded, heart aching with empathy. "We're all bruised, Elias. That's why we have to keep moving." As the weeks passed, Windsong Outreach, a program dreamed up by Janelle and Ava, came to life at the stable. They welcomed troubled youth, veterans struggling with trauma, and anyone who'd been told they were too much or not enough for the world. Icarus became the centerpiece of the program, his story a living lesson in survival, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Marissa, once the unyielding face of the law, now taught a night class at the local college, ethics and emotional responsibility in prosecution. She told her students the hard truths, the cases she'd gotten wrong, the danger of pride, the pain of certainty without compassion. A conviction without reflection is blindness with a badge, she told them. We owe it to each other and to ourselves to see the whole person, not just the facts in a file. Janelle's podcast gained traction across the country, inspiring listeners to question, to push, to care. Her inbox filled with letters, some from lawyers who wanted to change, some from prisoners desperate to be heard, and some from people who just needed hope. She read them aloud to Marissa on quiet evenings, their laughter and tears mingling in the warm, stable air. Ava's therapy program flourished. The children who came to her, angry, fearful, lost, found comfort in the horses, especially in Icarus, who never judged, who let them be broken and whole at the same time. Marissa watched a teenage boy, just released from juvenile detention, lead Icarus through a quiet walk across the paddock. She saw herself in his hunched shoulders, his cautious hope, and felt gratitude for the chance to be a part of something bigger than her own regret. Elias kept his circle small. He never spoke to the press, rarely left the stable, but he found joy in simple things. A morning ride, a shared meal, the way the sun felt on his face. Each day, he grew a little stronger, his steps a little more sure. He learned to smile again, to laugh at Janelle's terrible jokes, to find peace in the wind and the scent of grass. The stable became a haven, a place where no one was discarded, where every scar was honored. For Marissa, for Janelle, for Ava, for Elias, and for Icarus, life moved forward, not loudly, but with quiet determination. They carried the weight of the past, but they walked together toward a future built on honesty, humility, and the grace of forgiveness. The story of the White Stallion was no longer just about guilt or injustice. It was about dignity, reclaimed, lives rebuilt, and the profound truth that none of us is ever truly beyond saving. Not while hope remains, not while we keep riding forward. The sun set gently over Windsong Refuge, casting the paddocks and old wooden barns in a soft orange glow that made everything shimmer with peace. It was an evening like so many others in Santa Fe, but for Marissa, Ava, Janelle, Elias, and everyone whose lives had been touched by the storm, the air felt charged with quiet triumph, a sense that, after so many years, a long battle had finally come to rest. Children played by the fences, their laughter mingling with the soft snorts of the horses. Icarus grazed in the golden light, his white coat shining like something half-remembered from a dream, his tail flicking lazily as he wandered through the field. Marissa leaned on the fence, watching him, the weight she'd carried for years finally growing light enough to let her breathe. There were no TV cameras, no reporters, no flashbulbs now, only the sound of life returning, of hope being rebuilt. That evening, Janelle brought out a battered shoebox full of letters. From listeners, from strangers, some from families we've helped, some from people who say our story gave them hope. She handed a letter to Marissa. The handwriting was careful, the paper soft from being folded and unfolded many times. Marissa read aloud, her voice steady but thick with feeling. Dear Marissa, I was never good with words. They called me silent, but I was screaming the whole time. Just not in a language anyone bothered to learn. Thank you for finally listening. Elias. Tears slipped down Marissa's cheeks, but this time they were cleansing, not shaming. She glanced across the pasture, where Elias now moved with a quiet confidence she never would have expected that first broken morning after his release. Icarus followed at his side, nuzzling the man's palm, and a group of children trailed behind, giggling as they tried to keep up with the old stallion's long stride. Nearby, Ava finished brushing down a bay gelding, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, her face smudged with dust and sweat and happiness. She'd found her own peace here, among the horses and the kids who needed them. She smiled as a veteran, one of the stable's new therapy clients, helped a nervous child up onto Icarus's broad back, the stallion standing perfectly still, patient and kind. Janelle took a deep breath, settling onto the bench beside Marissa. You ever think about how it all started? How none of this would have happened if you hadn't listened? If you hadn't believed things could be different? Marissa shook her head. I think about all the times I didn't listen. The times I took the easy way out. The times I let my own certainty blind me to the truth. That's the hardest part. Knowing how close I came to letting a good man die, and how easily it could have happened to someone else, to anyone. Janelle offered her a small, understanding smile. But you changed. You faced it, and you fixed what you could. For a while, neither spoke. They simply watched the sunset, watched Icarus and Elias move through the pasture, watched hope made visible. The refuge had become more than just a place for discarded horses or troubled people. It was a place for second chances. Every animal and every person who came through its gates brought something broken, and together, slowly, they built something whole. The horses who had been deemed useless now gave comfort to others. The children and veterans who arrived in pain left with a sense of dignity. Windsong Outreach became a symbol in the region, a living testament to the power of humility, persistence, and grace. Later that night, Marissa sat by the fire pit as the last of the children were called in for dinner, the sky deepening from gold to indigo. Ava, Janelle, and Elias gathered around, mugs of tea warming their hands. Icarus stood just at the edge of the firelight, as if listening. I keep thinking about what all this means, Marissa said quietly. What's the lesson? For us? For anyone who hears our story? Ava was the first to answer. It means redemption isn't something you wait for. You have to earn it, sometimes through pain, sometimes through mistakes. It's uncomfortable, but that's the price for real change. Janelle nodded. And it's not just about the law, or guilt, or innocence. It's about choosing to look deeper, to see the human and the animal beneath the labels, the headlines, the stories people tell. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask a new question, or refuse to give up on someone everyone else has written off. Elias, voice soft but clear, added, They locked me up and called me silent. But it was the world that refused to listen. If you want justice, you have to listen, even when the truth hurts, even when it means admitting you were wrong. Marissa felt the truth settle in her bones. For a long time, I thought justice was about answers. But now, I know it's about the questions you never stop asking, the willingness to be uncomfortable, the courage to choose what's right, even when it means letting go of everything you thought you knew. The group fell silent, each lost in their thoughts, warmed by the fire. The memory of storms survived, and the promise of brighter tomorrows. Moral analysis and lesson. This story isn't about a perfect ending, it's about an honest one. Redemption is not granted like a pardon or a verdict. It is earned and often paid for with humility, discomfort, and the willingness to stand in the light and confess your failings. The system is not just laws and procedures, it is people, capable of error, capable of change, and capable of great acts of courage and grace. Icarus, the silent white horse, represents every living being, animal or human, discarded not for who they are, but for someone else's convenience, fear, or pride. And yet, like Icarus, true worth is proven by persistence, by showing up again and again until even the blind can see. If this story touched something inside you, don't let it end here. Speak for those who've been silenced, fight for those wrongly caged, stand up for the forgotten, the bruised, and the cast aside. And most of all, believe in second chances, even for yourself. Because sometimes the path to justice, forgiveness, and healing begins where a white horse leads. As the fire burned low and the stars rose over Windsong Refuge, Marissa knew that the real ending was a beginning, one she would ride toward, not with certainty, but with hope. And she would never ride alone.